Hello friends and welcome to Noclip Editing Club. I've been meaning to do this for a long time. A show, a sort of continuing feature where I take a look at the projects after they're done and kind of detail them, everything from pre-production to the script to post-production, kind of what stands out in any one of those projects. And you know, I like to share my timelines on Twitter, and people are often saying like, oh, I wish you did more breakdowns or more production classes like you guys used to do. So this is like a fun way for me to dive into some of these projects and show you guys, you know, sort of how I make the sausage, right? Because the thing about editing is that it's like painting. There are sort of best practices, but there's no wrong way to do it. I mean, there's probably wrong ways to do it, but there are multiple valid ways to go about doing projects like these. I want to sort of get us talking about them. So I'm going to do these every once in a while. I'm kind of thinking once a month, if we can do that around the big projects, that would be ideal for me. And kind of feel it out and see how it goes and post them. And then maybe we can chat about them in the comments on YouTube or on Patreon. Is going to be patron exclusive because I know a lot of you are sort of into video production. So, if you don't know this project, this is the Microsoft Flight Sim documentary that just went up on the channel. It is about 32 minutes long before we hit the credits. Credits always add a couple of minutes, 2.5 minutes to the end of our run times, and we love them because that's all of you folks there who are supporting our work. I have to edit some of your names because they get too long and they break over into this part. But if you haven't seen this project, it is a very defined structure, and the reason for this was that the subject matter is kind of complex, and we needed to teach the player or the viewer a lot of things along the way for them to get a clear picture of how this game was made. So it was kind of like sitting right in front of me the whole time. What this was going to be about. It was going to be about how they built the world, how Microsoft Flight Simulator went from being a sort of an idea to looking something like this. Like that's, you know, pretty remarkable looking game. In fact, that is basically our thumbnail. I rotated this image slightly for the thumbnail, rotated it like that way a little bit, popped it in a little bit as well, like there maybe. Put the Microsoft Flight Sim logo in the background here, did a little mask. Tried to do a little reflection thing on the river, but it actually made it less beautiful, so I took it out. And then had a big sign saying the entire world, which is there for the people who need that extra push to watch a video that's 30 minutes long. And we found it quite effective over the past year or so of trying those new types of thumbnails. I know they irk some people, but hopefully you understand the reasoning behind them. And yeah, the reaction to this doc has been very fun because it's basically been what I wanted, which was that I wanted people to come away from this feeling like the game had achieved a lot and also having some sort of an emotional response to the end. So today I'm going to talk about just 3 parts of this because we're not going to dive into the whole thing. The 3 most important parts. The intro, which sort of establishes what we're doing in terms of the narrative of this piece. It's actually incredibly obvious what it does, but I think it's effective. The ending, which is supposed to give you a sort of an emotional bit of a kick. And then the meat of this, or the innards of this particular documentary sandwich, which is the structure of the pieces. And what we'll look at one piece, one section, because these are literally chaptered. They're chaptered within the doc, and they are chaptered on the YouTube timeline, which is a great little piece of technology that I'm a big fan of. Let me actually get that up here, see if I can get the play. I'm actually not logged into my account here. Oh, there it is. It pops up here. That's very good. There's a thumbnail, as you can see it. Here's the rest of the things that I watch. I watch a lot of people crashing cars, Formula 1, Faithless, that's true, and film stuff, and planes crashing, and planes flying. This is about I guess getting icing on your plane or something. Anyway, and UFC. So this is how it pops up. The animation they do after the fact, they just pull some short frames. So here's a video of Up, the game, which is mentioned for a total of 3 seconds maybe in the doc. But yeah, the chapter markers here, they're very easy to do. If you go into the description, you basically just stick them in there. As long as you have one that says 00, it will pull that data and it will create these chapters based on the titles you've just made. So the structure here on YouTube is the structure of the doc. We have an introduction, we have an outroduction, outro here, the credits I always separate, and then we have, I believe it's 5 sections: building the team, creating the planet, adding the human world, simulating weather, and designing planes. And then we talk about where people fly, which is sort of the emotional sucker punch that's supposed to be there at the end. So let's dive into the intro. So this documentary was always going to be very detail orientated. It was going to be about machine learning and algorithms and lots of things that can be boring and or complex. So it was important for me to establish that there was an emotional base to this, because there is. Because when we listen to Sebastian, we listen to Jorg, and we sort of talk about the whole point of this, I guess, because this is very much a doc about how hard games are made, and then why, you know, what's the point about all of this. It's kind of it's not subtext or metaphor. It's just the sort of the idea behind what we want people to feel when they move away from it. So because of that, because it's so technical focused, I could not start with them just talking about, you know, the history of flight sim, because you might not care about flight sim, and if you don't, then none of this is going to register. The next section we need to sort of establish is where, you know, who the teams are, you know, so where Asobo is in the world and what they're working on and what they worked on in the past with Up Games and A Plague Tale. If we introduce this right off the bat, it's just going to fall flat. People aren't going to be connected to it at all. So we need to give them something emotional to hold on to that's familiar, so that they will give us a few minutes of their time, and then in that time, hopefully we will establish new emotional hooks that then will sort of keep them, you know, medium to long term. Because YouTube is always kind of about battling people's desire to tap on something else. So let's just have a quick little look at the intro and kind of see how that all plays out. So we have our usual Noclip thing. Always starts that way. Music comes in. This is music from the game. It was perfect for us. And then 3 shots of the game worlds looking beautiful. This one you can see the bridge is broken. I actually missed that. And then that's our thumbnail. Gorgeous lifting music, and then into an intro. It's impossible not to be emotional about flying, but what that emotion is can vary quite a bit. For some, it's the thrill, the wonderment of a human being airborne, hurtling through the skies at impossible speeds. For others, it's fear, the lack of control, unimaginable heights, bumps along the way, and the terrifying lack of legroom. It can be wonder, the feeling of exploration, the excitement of seeing somewhere new at the destination and along the way. And of course, joy, a journey back after too much time away, seeing old friends, embracing loved ones, returning home, or finding a new one. Alright, let's leave it there. So, what's the point of this? This was tricky. This took a lot of moving things around, messing with the script, trying to make it so it felt natural and interesting and you could resonate with it and not like stupid and campy and overly emotional and overly wrought. Also, I swapped this picture of Germany with this picture of, I don't know where this is. It looks like Greece probably, or maybe Italy. It looks Mediterranean. To actually just, but the Pond 5 thing probably actually says what it is. Where is it? Oh, it's Brazil. Okay. America dos Búzios, wherever that is. Because the line here was going home, I think. And of course, joy, a journey back after too much time away. Yeah, nobody lives there. So, so I was like, let's just stick Germany in instead. That looks a bit more generic. So the point of this was to basically connect you with the feeling of the strongest feeling I can imagine at this stage, because usually we basically tie and try people emotionally, or I do, to the game itself. That's usually our emotional hook, is that you care about the game. That's why you're watching this video. The subset of people who play Flight Simulator is always going to be way smaller than the amount of people who might watch this video. It's not one of those games. It's not like The Witcher, where we can just make it about The Witcher, or Doom, or Rocket League, right? This was a game that has a smaller, more passionate audience who will probably watch this, but our audience, which is a bit more generalist, chances are they're not going to play this game because it's got a high barrier to entry, seemingly because of the skill and maybe also the cost of controllers and stuff like that. So this was to basically create an emotional connection that everyone could appreciate, which is what it's like being in an airplane. And for lots of people, it's different. It's scary, or it's fun, or it's, wonderful, or it's uncomfortable, or it's the destination is the most important thing. And for most of it, it's a mixture of all of these things. So basically, the intro is there to be a sort of, it's almost like a loot box of emotions, and I'm serving them up one by one. And hopefully, by the time we've gotten to this sentence, well, not to be emotional about flying, but what that emotion is can vary quite a bit. Hopefully, by now you're already thinking, oh, I wonder if he'll mention my emotion. That's kind of, so this is just hooking you in for this much, right? And then the next bit of the video will hook you in for longer. The selection of B-roll here was tricky. For a while, I was going for sort of an archival look, like put some film grain on this stuff, make it look like old-timey, maybe punch it in. Like I had ideas of like framing it. There's a lot of framing work going on, like doing something like that and having like different ones pop up all over the screen. I have a Pond 5 subscription, which we pay a lot for, and I don't use in most projects, but when I do, I use it a lot. And this was a project where I used a lot of Pond 5. It's a video licensing service. So all of these are clips that I would have paid $50 for usually, but I always have autosave on. That's what that was. Always have your autosave on just in case, even if you're doing this and the project's already done. But the idea was to, So I went in and basically grabbed lots of these different shots of planes, and there's only like 3 shots of planes. So you need to be, I had to be sort of diligent in making sure that we broke this up so it had a feel. The shots of people filming outside of the wings like this, that's why they're far away from each other. The shots of planes from the ground like this and like this. And then there are shots of aerials basically. And then the sort of angle of these is important. Like this is a lateral pan. This is a forward motion mostly. I think this is a plane going over a hill. Most of this shot was unusable because of the motion felt totally wrong or too wobbly. So you needed it just wobbly enough, but not overly wobbly. More side pans. And then there was some sort of human touches. And these were tricky. The sort of general thing I like to do is to not use faces for people who we're not interviewing. So the back of somebody's head for this section, the excitement of seeing somewhere new. That's an experience. This is a first-person experience that most people can appreciate. If they've ever been on a plane, they know what it feels like filing in. Some people are sitting down already who are in the A group, and you're kind of like making your way into this plane and waiting to feel comfortable and settle in. It's a very evocative sort of image. Like we know what that feels like. The trickiest ones were these two, and that's why I kept them really short, because they feel they're the most out of place shots in the whole thing, which is this woman and her kid and the guy, like the granddad fixing his belt. Unimaginable heights, bumps along the way, and the terrifying lack of legroom. I also whispered legroom, so I had to like pump the audio up on my VO here and put the music down. I'll do a breakdown of like visually what's going on here as well in a second, just in case you don't see my structure. It's really obvious to me, but it probably isn't to you. I didn't do any color correction on these, which I probably would have if I had another chance. This clip is really long. I think it's like a whole... That's not that long actually. This grandma with her kid, and there's like kind of fake turbulence, like Star Trek style turbulence. So I just wanted to feel that turbulence, so it cuts in, bumps along the way. There you go. And the terrifying. He's putting his belt together because he's a little bit worried too, maybe. So, bumps along, big crotch shot. So you don't see his face. We see the grandma's face, but hopefully only for like a second. And the terrifying lack of and then we're out of it. But those easily could have been like this long, and you'll see the difference. Like imagine if it looked like this. It's fear, the lack of control, unimaginable heights, bumps along the way, and the terrifying lack of legroom. Just feels a bit more trite or like constructed. There's also like banding happening there. There's like the light, the LEDs. I never noticed that actually before. At the start, you can see the way and the light banding there. The terrifying lack of shutter speed. So keeping it a bit like this. Fear, the lack of control, unimaginable heights, bumps along the way, and the terrifying lack of legroom. Just like kind of in and out, because I didn't like these shots, so I wanted them to be pretty quick if I could help it. I always control S when I've moved things too much. Also, I like the idea of having the shot of the heights for unimaginable heights. So that's kind of the bones of what this thing is. Trying to make the connections with the words and the images be somewhat connected. And then we're going to pan into this. And this little, I'm not sure if I got this transition quite well enough, but I wanted to just like, I wanted all this stuff to feel connected to the me part, to me being here. There's basically like, you know, there's a couple of different visual worlds we're inhabiting here in this edit. One is the world of the interviewee, which is this sort of transit hub aesthetic that I've gone for here, which is where we're going to talk to Jorg and Sebastian through mostly. There's only 2 shots where they are full screen. The rest of it is always framed in either this type of frame or this type of... Is that it? No, where is it? This type of frame? Oh, no. So there's this full screen. So there's 3, actually. Jorg at the start, the last shot of Jorg, and there's 1 shot of Sebastian in a different part because of an editing pacing issue that I needed to not have him go back to a square. So there's that. Then there's sort of like me in this world here with the planes beside Oakland Airport. Is about to Baltimore Airport. Then there's the game stuff, which we're going to see a lot of, like just general cutting into games and stuff. And then there is this. This definitely inhabits a different sort of space because it doesn't feel gameplay-y. But I did want to create this sort of... it was a bit more deliberate in some of the earlier versions where I had a lot more of this gameplay of the game mixed in with this gameplay to basically try and confuse you, to make it so that you couldn't actually tell what was game or what wasn't. But it was causing a little bit too many problems, so I kind of held back from that. But that's also why, for instance, we cut from gameplay to this, to try and give you that connection of, oh, this is the same sense. When you're playing this game, you're having a sense of flight in the same way you have a sense of flight when you're on a plane. So that's kind of some of the stuff that's going on here. And then we get into my little connection, which it's pretty fast. The transition is kind of like, okay, well, let's keep the pace going here. Friends, embracing loved ones, returning home, or finding a new one.
There's no escaping the wonder of mechanized human flight, and proof of that is in the game we're about to talk about today. Microsoft Flight Simulator is one of the longest running game series of all time, and over its 40-year tenure, it's also been a showcase for the power of video games. Not just their power to simulate real-world places, but their power to stir emotions in players.
So same thing again, the script is basically establishing, yes, this is going to be very technical, but also, hey, do you know about emotions? And, you know, I'm basically repeating the same thing over and over again. There's sort of a rule, I don't know where it came from or who said it or whatever, but you kind of, it might actually be a game design thing, I'm not sure. But you kind of need to tell the viewer like 3 times what's happening. You can't just have it happen once. They might get it, they might pick up on it. And if it's a theme within your production or your film or whatever it is, then it should probably be mentioned, you know, more than once. So I'm saying it a bunch of different times. In the intro, it's like, you know, flight is, you know, technical but also emotional. This intro is like, oh, this is very technical but also emotional. And then in the next series, I'm going to detail everything technical and end with, but there's the emotional part. The edit here is pretty simple. There's a little bit of an audio gap between the script, the VO, and my written, my spoken stand-ups. Ones, returning home or finding a new one.
There's no escaping the...
And the cut's deliberate. There was more overlap here previously. I had a bit of an L cut here. I think the last time I did this video it was when I learned that was the name for those. What are they? L cuts and what's the other one? T cuts, V cuts, B cuts? I forget. I've already forgotten. Tell me again in the comments. New one.
There's no escaping the wonder.
That actually might have worked better, but I'm not sure if it would have shortened this clip too much. Embracing loved ones, returning home, or finding a new one.
There's no escaping...
Yeah, that might have worked better actually. A new one.
There's no escaping the wonder...
Much of a muchness. The flash in the back of the plane is actually the problem.
There's no...
Yeah, it's fine. So there's an eyeline thing here as well happening where it's easy to cut. Originally I had this cut as the shot, I think. It cut from this into...
There's no escaping the wonder of...
But then your eye went from, you know, you're looking at the... You always have to be conscious of where the viewer is looking. So here they're clearly looking at the airplane, right? So their eyes are up here in the top of the frame. And if we cut to this, what I want them to be noticing is this plane landing, if we can help it. It's a tough shot. We didn't know where they were landing exactly. If Jeremy might have moved to the right here and gotten it closer to me so you could see the motion. But if we cut from this to this, you're probably got your eye lines here, and chances are you're going to go to me and not that. And by the time you've realized I am looking that way at something, you might not know it. So this is like if you've ever watched Mad Max Fury Road, you'll see how everything's center weighted, which is interesting in an edit. But the reason why, or interesting in how they shot it, but the reason why is because the editing is so fast that your eyes are basically always in the center of the frame when you're watching Mad Max Fury Road. So everything's always happening in the middle. So that's kind of you see the plane moving, and then when that cut happens, the plane is still in the same spot. It's a different plane, different shot, but you don't have to jump around the frame. And that's like a really important thing for editing, is to basically guide the viewer's eyes as much as possible and do the work for them. So here it's like, here we're looking at the plane.
There's no escaping the wonder of mechanized human flight, and proof of that is in the game we're about to talk about.
Maybe we'll see it there because the connection of it's landing.
Microsoft Flight Sim
basically just wanted people to know I'm beside an airport. And I'm not sure how well we did that, but
Simulator is one of the longest running game series.
There's that. And then into this is the last part of our intro section.
In players.
Microsoft Flight Simulator is among the most beautiful and technically impressive pieces of software ever made. A labor of love for two teams separated by an ocean and 5,000 miles, because that ocean and each of those miles are actually in the game. You see, Microsoft Flight Simulator contains the entire world. Every country, every city, every airport, road, almost every tree. And in this video we're going to explore how the teams achieved that and more. How they created their digital twin of planet Earth. The way they breathed life, weather and nature into that world. How they modeled dozens of planes to a higher degree of fidelity that we've ever seen. And in many ways, most importantly, the effect of releasing a game that allowed people to visit home, as a global health crisis has billions of us grounded.
I've been obsessed with the story of how this game was made for a while now, so it's my absolute pleasure to share with you. So please, sit back, relax, and let us take you on one of the most unique journeys in game design you're ever likely to be on.
Alright, so, like I said, same thing again. Technical. Here's how they did the weather, and the planes, and the things, and the airports, and the world, and isn't it amazing? And then, most importantly, and in many ways, most importantly, the effect of releasing a game that allowed people to visit home, as a global health crisis has billions of us grounded. And then the outro of the intro is basically just there to be like, yo, just stick around. Like, this is really interesting. I have been interested in this myself. I'm excited to share this with you. Sit back and relax. Like, I'm literally telling them, take your hand off the next video screen. Like, take your hand off the mouse. Don't tap your phone. Just like rest with us on this one. Trust us. We're going to entertain you like hopefully we did over the first 2 minutes of this video.
Now, so it's my absolute pleasure to share with you. So please, sit back, relax, and let us take you on one of the most unique journeys in game design you're ever likely to be on.
Let me go into this little intro.
Southwest 3901 taxi.
I love this music so much.
Alright, taxi 4, I think we cross the freeway southwest 30.
Yeah, let me make that when you do things in quarter quality mode in the preview window, text always looks terrible. So sorry for making you suffer through that here.
Cross the freeway southwest 3901.
I've been at Microsoft for over 20 years now, and so the notion of making another flight simulator has been.
Okay, so I'm not going to continue into this section. We'll pick a different section for the look at one of these chapters, but. Just to give you the idea of like establishing this video, which is the last part of the intro we'll do. So there's a couple of things here. I want this ATC radar stuff that's in the background, air traffic control radar stuff that's in the background is actually from a video game called Infinite ATC, I believe. It's a ATC, what would you call it? Infinite Runner maybe, where you have to keep landing planes over and over again. So I think that's Schiphol, is it, in Amsterdam? Rami Ismail said that he recognized it when it turned up right away. Of course, that being his home airport of Vlambeer, or at least Rami Vlambeer not being around anymore. So this background was always going to be here, right? Because we had these Zoom calls, it didn't look great, didn't sound fantastic. So I wanted to give them some sort of a visual hook that felt fun and novel, and this is sort of an analog quality to air traffic, between the chunky screens we have on planes to ATC radio and all that sort of stuff. So I thought if I framed it in a way that kind of worked with it, it would be easy to do. And the other thing is I'm not very good at motion graphics. So I had to sort of lean on, what's the most I can get out of doing this on Premiere instead of pulling up After Effects and spending, 4 or 5 days trying to get something working. So I built a frame in Photoshop. It's a square. It's a rectangle. And I fit everything into that. I just manually put it in, copy and pasted it across the project. So we had consistency. It's slightly out of line, I think. But I don't care. It looks good enough. The text are two fonts that I found that were somewhat airplane themed. Sky Font, which is this one, the bottom one, which looks like one of those departure boards, and the other one's called Another Flight, and it kind of has a 70s airplane sort of aesthetic to it. Every text in the video is using at least one of those, so there's some sort of visual consistency. Hey, sorry, I'm back. You probably didn't even notice the cut, but Shadowplay for some reason just spat out the video file that I had there, so I've swapped hard drives just in case there's a problem going on over there. Where was I? So, yes, so the intro was I couldn't animate this, so instead I just pulled some audio of a couple of things here. There's a departure board here. There's some ambient noise from Heathrow Airport in London. And then there's an ATC chatter file that I pulled off of, I don't know, a YouTube video or something.
3901, runway 4 right, taxi via Tango Yankee, cross through and right, center left.
It's a couple of, it's a Southwest hub.
Alright, taxi 4 right, Tango Yankee, cross the 31 southwest, 3901.
Yeah, so he's just taxiing there to departure, I think. So, yeah, there's a couple of things here. So instead of animating this text, this font, which I couldn't do because I'm not good at After Effects, it would take me a week to do it, so why would I bother? Instead, I just got the departure board and faded it in, and hopefully people put it together in their heads. And then we have the airport sounds as well, and then ATC chatter for...
Southwest 3901, taxi.
3901, runway 4 right, taxi via Tango Yankee, cross through and right,
fade in the background slowly of this endless ATC footage.
center left.
And then instead of cutting, I just decided, it took me a while to get this pacing right, I just decided to fade Jorg in the same way, just disappear those and fade him in.
4 right, Tango Yankee, cross the 31 southwest, 3901.
I've been at Microsoft for over 20 years now, and so the notion.
We're still fading out the ambient noise here of Heathrow Airport. So yeah, the idea was to kind of be like, oh, you're already watching this. You're already you didn't even know you were in the interview yet, but you're already here. Let me have a quick look at my timeline structure just in case you guys are a little bit confused about what's going on here, especially if you're not into editing. All the video tracks are here. This line in the middle separates audio from video. And I have multiple video tracks, perhaps 7 all in all. I tend to have a lot of video tracks because I tend to do a lot of visual effects in Premiere. So I'll have sometimes, a 7 or 8 video track, but I'll only ever use it for 3 seconds somewhere on the timeline because I'm putting up a bunch of text or something. It's not the most efficient, but it works and it's fine and it's not detrimental to my project management. I understand what's going on. I have the audio tracks probably where it's most separated. If you look up in the top left, I have some processes happening on different audio tracks. So here's the audio track mixer. The one to the leftmost is the first of your audio tracks. So audio 1, then audio 2, audio 3, audio 4. So that's 1, 2, and then 3 and 4 I have nothing on. So that means that 1 and 2 are basically being used for interview audio. So the A1, which is audio track 1, I use for all of the interview audio. So that's
company, because it's our oldest IP. It's our oldest, longest running IP.
So that's Jorg and Sebastian. I have a denoiser running on the background, mostly for Sebastian's terrible audio, which required a bit of work, and then a bit of dynamics processing, but not all that much. It kind of was what it was. If you mess with it too much, I just took off the edges of the nasty Zoom call sort of aesthetic sound to it, and then just kind of didn't do too much, because if you over compress it, it actually sounds a bit more grating. Then we have a sort of an ear for that type of call. And then on my one, I've got some soft compression going on, dynamics processing. I'm pulling up the audio a bit here, and not much else. I don't have a limiter on it. I don't have a gate. My audio recording for VO was kind of fine. I had some hard P's and hard B's, which I had to trim out, and some I left in because I couldn't be arsed. And that's what happens at the end of a project. You're like, I'm not recording this, it's fine. But that all the VO is on number 2. So you'll see it here. If you kind of split it out a bit, you can kind of see all this top one here is all the interview audio. 2 is all my VO. And then 3, there's actually a couple of effects in here. What's that? What are you doing in here? Gameplay. So I left some gameplay in there. So then everything after 1 and 2, there's no processing happening on it, so I can use those for whatever. So that's basically 3, 4, and 5 are either music, which are these long ones. They're all music. This is music. This is music. Anything with ANW means audio network. It's our music library. And then effects kind of get jumbled in there too. So that whole intro part I just showed you with the ATC chatter and stuff. I broke my own rule. I had the ATC chatter in audio too. I actually think I had it out of that, and then it sounded better in there, so I left it in there. So Heathrow Airport, the departure board, and the music is all here. And then because I do crossfades on my music, I always end up jumping from timeline to timeline. There's probably a more efficient way of doing this, but because of the way I like to play with it, I always end up doing, like, I could do a constant game between the two of those, but I'm actually introducing them and lowering them at different rates. Like this one's getting pulled in slower than this one's getting pulled out. So I tend to jump between the timelines. So you'll hear the music. This is just to keep the music looping.
In fact, Flight Simulator and A Plague Tale were being developed at the same time, and remarkably, they share the same engine.
So hopefully you didn't notice the transition there. It's because these songs aren't as long as you want them to be. That's the end of the file stops there, but I needed it to go all the way to hit it, all the way to there. Yeah, and then from the top, the top part is pretty basic. You know, general B-roll, if I know nothing's going underneath it, goes in 1. The interviews go. The video goes in the bottom. There's an adjustment layer on this, which is a color grading Jeremy's done. That's how it was filmed. That's how he made it look a lot more red and warm. But I liked the feel of it. And then there's the shot. A little bit less red and warm there, but these were. It was a nice. It was an interesting spot to film in because it was super harsh sunlight. You can't really tell there. It was kind of nasty to film in it, so Jeremy did a great job. And then yeah, some of the more complex things is just like a lot of graphics happening. So you know, there's his lower third, there's the frame, there's Jorg himself. What's underneath him? What's behind him that I deleted? It's probably Sebastian, is it? Yeah, Sebastian's there. So we interviewed them at the same time, which you might not notice because they're never on screen at the same time. But that's why if you see there's ones that are gone, it's usually Sebastian's video. In an earlier version of this, my video was also in here, which I have just as reference because you never know. Maybe he says something and I want to pull up what my reaction was. So I like to just keep it there just in case I need to, you know, grab it back. Or in this case, Sebastian looking at Jorg talking. So that's the intro. Let's do one of the sections now because it'll be a bit weird to do the outro right away. So the video is split into, like I said, some pretty obvious sections. Here's the first one, building the team. They all have the same thing where someone's talking and then we'll
really takes us forward.
I used a lot of music cues on this one, so I queued this up so once we had that cut, it would go
forward.
Which felt good. You see the Heathrow sounds and the ATC chatter again. So it was the constant motif. So for each of those sections, it was the same thing. Watch this. And that's just to let the viewer know, like it's fine. We're at this. It's called breadcrumbing. It's the idea that they know where they're going and they know where it's like the opposite of putting their breadcrumbs for Hansel and Gretel. It's that they know where they're going to go. Is that like they're getting familiar with the piece. These are consistent. These sections are consistent. They're consistently, by the time they get to part 2, they've already had, this is like they've had the intro sting, they've had part 1, then they've had part 2. Part 2 is a little bit longer than some of the other ones, so that's why it was nice to have this here, and we can get them to come along on a bit of a journey with us until we get to part 3, which is over here, which is about 7 minutes later. The human world. Same sort of transition. Watch again. It's all a solution. So it's just bringing them along piece by piece by piece by piece by piece. Where is 4 then? 4 is the airplanes. Or weather is. Okay, so let's take a look at this one, because it's not the longest. The human worlds. We've established that the world is being made by all these procedural things, and then we're moving on to the next one. Each of these sections follows the exact same sort of pattern. You can almost see it here in the script, where they talk. I do some voiceover to reestablish stuff. Sometimes I'll do voiceover to intro the idea, perhaps. But they're talking, and I'm sort of like backing up what they're saying or filling in the gaps. So for this part, I think this might have been the first section where we actually come directly into an interview after the intro. So this is sort of...
Okay, let's back it up a little bit because a lot of complicated stuff was just talked about. The HoloLens project...
So just the theme in this edit a lot is me going back and re-explaining things. Just, again, because there's a lot of detail here, and sometimes it takes a second go to sort of... to learn something. So most of the time I'm coming in after the intro. I think this is the first time that I come from the intro directly into an interview.
We have some buildings where like in Seattle.
Yeah, because I think I've sort of established that this is, people are now familiar and comfortable, so I don't have to babysit the viewer as much as perhaps I was at the start. Here we have Sebastian's rough audio that is also French, but thankfully people were able to understand it, which is good. Not his fault, it's not my fault. It's just a sort of general issue with the current, production problems we have with coronavirus. But let's just have a little watch of this and kind of see where it's. I might speed up some of this, so if it sounds fast, it's because I'm speeding it up just to get through it. Because I actually use speed ramps a lot when I'm editing as well, because I'm sort of looking at it from a little bit more of a bird's eye perspective, kind of like this shot.
3D scan, so there's already buildings. So there's obviously it's not just done, right? We need also, is there texture, is this glass? So there's all sorts of stuff. So that was already handled on our side. But that company, basically, they can build buildings in 3D when you have nothing. I mean, most of the time, what we have is a top-down picture, and so they look at the top-down picture and find the roof color, not only color. And so they train the computers on AI to recognize, is it a flat roof or is it like this roof, right? Or what kind of roof is this, right? And then it can basically say, after enough training, it can say, this is a hangar, this is a school, or whatever. It can find the type of building just by looking at the roof.
So all this footage, a lot of this is stuff pulled from their channel. So my over here on the left is my project bin, where I have all of my different little folders, my bins for everything. Gameplay capture here. Here's some, Microsoft Flight Sim I've captured on the other machine. Footage mostly has any sort of footage that I am procuring. Pond 5 stuff, the ATC things. And then the Flight Sim YouTube channel, I literally downloaded the entire channel. And that was our biggest resource, was all of these developer videos that they did. All of these are available on their channel. I actually had an earlier part of the script where I basically said you should go watch all their videos because it explains all this shit. Just not in one video. And not with the sort of emotional sort of 1-2 we're going for here. A little bit of graphics for the machine learning section, which was very, very basic. I just made some pictures and transition between them. Our music is here, the Microsoft Flight Simulator soundtrack I downloaded, and then I have a bunch of audio network footage that I sort of wanted to be thematically similar, that use a lot of strings and ambient fields. So this is the theme. It's way too uplifting though. It was way too cheery for anything. I almost had it in the credits, but even there, excuse me, even there it didn't sound right. But this one feels way better. It's like some sort of Clint Mansell music. I listen to music like this actually generally quite a lot, so it felt really at home with it. And then I tried to pull music that was sort of like that. Ethereal and use like classical instruments and not too many instruments, like a violin or a piano, like one standout with a sort of an ambient bed happening. Or this one. Okay, this is a good example of when it's doing too much, but on Audio Network, if you go to the alternate, usually number 2, it'll usually be a little bit softer. A little bit softer. Lost in Norway. Don't think I used that. I used this one for sure. Yeah, Yeah, so just like ambient music, just like resting on the theme. The music, everything has to have a theme. Like you need to have a strong visual theme, or I like to have a strong visual theme, like a, you know, the way this looks. Have the music have a consistent theme. I guess a consistent theme is more important than a strong theme. And even the way you handle gameplay should be like fairly consistent. Like, you know, we didn't use any drone shots. It was all in-game gameplay. Sometimes I forgot to take the shadow play icon out, like here. There might be one up in this video up here too in the top left. I zoomed in most of them a little bit. These were all shot in 4K, so I should have punched into like 105 here on the scale, and I'll get rid of it and basically retain the same shot, which I did on a lot of these. But you know, this one here is that one didn't have a thumbnail on it. Yeah. So anyway, I digress. So he talks, and then it comes back to me, who kind of fills in some of the gaps, most of which was stuff he said in this part of the interview, but I just wanted to rattle through it a little bit faster.
Don't see any difference.
Photogrammetry and building detection did a lot of the heavy lifting when it came to creating an effective 3D representation of the entire globe, be it your hometown, a village in a part of the world you've never been to, or a popular tourist destination. The algorithm tooled and tweaked by the studio can effectively generate realistic approximations. But not the best line delivery there. It kind of sounded like I finished the sentence twice. But anyway, that's how these sections went. They're very technical, and you know, what you see is what you get. And I'm basically trying to cover off. I have a list of all the things that we need to talk about so that this makes sense to people. Performance.
Just like world generation, the human life on this planet was also created using a variety of machine learning, algorithms, and hand-painted detail. But this world was orders of magnitude larger than any other game world we'd ever seen. So how do you test to make sure everything's in its right place? How do you check for accuracy? And when is accurate enough enough?
My voiceover is really low down here. I guess I was using the 5th audio track to get it out of some of those. I think I have my own... Yeah, I have my own dynamics on this one. It's not on the timeline. It's actually on the audio file itself. Because you can do effects on a timeline, or you can do it on... Usually for video, you'll do it on the actual asset itself, which is what I've done here. There's a dynamics been done here when I was editing this on a different timeline. Probably here. This is the rushes that Jeremy sends me. And then we can... like pull all the shots from here, some of these shots we didn't use, so I keep that there, and I just jump from timeline to timeline. Yeah, and that's it. The other thing to mention here, you know, these sections are very, you know, structural. The editing skill that's going here is not so much about any sort of like wider theme. It's just trying to effectively communicate. Like have them talk for 2 minutes, have me talk for 2 minutes, have them talk for 2 minutes, have me talk, and then we'll get into the next section and we start again. As long as it's interesting, as long as the gameplay or the footage or the B-roll effectively complements what you're saying, doesn't have to match it, just to complement it, then you know, that's just, you know, that's just documentary sort of filmmaking, or a lot of, you know, factual documentary or video essay, factual editing. That's kind of just what you do. You kind of complement your argument or what you're saying. So there's not all that much to go into. The only thing I wanted to mention is that we used the exact same shot for each of these. We didn't mess with it. I'm going to be on screen so few times that there was no need for it. We could have pushed in or changed or reset or made it look different maybe in a time where I was going to be speaking twice. But I really like these parts to be breathers where I kind of had a bit of a chat. Like this one is... That was 20 seconds of me talking.
World generation, the human life on this planet was also created using a variety of machine learning.
Because there's a lot of editing. There's a lot of jumping happening. And you're asking a lot of the viewer. So it's nice when you get back to me that consistently it's long. They know they're getting a break. They know they're just like, oh, we're going to talk for a little while. Okay. And that's the same for some of the intros. Sometimes you just need to let them talk. Like a lot of the times there's lots, like here, for instance, Sebastian's talking here. And there's a lot, he talks there, he's on screen for a bit. For the most part, there's B-roll, right? Lots of B-roll, lots of detail. And when you're doing that, you're asking the viewer to do two things. You're asking them to listen to the words and also listen to the video, which might not match exactly what they're saying, because it's complementing. It might be adding to their argument in a different way. It might be showing something. Like this transition is showing the difference between the flat world and what's happening. And your brain is thinking about that and also thinking about what he's saying. So it's work. You know, it's a lot of work for the viewer. So every once in a while, like when Jorg's here, we're just going to let him talk.
Enough.
There's still some bugs. Like there's some roundabouts where we don't really quite know the orientation of the cars. So they end up going like, you know, like the teapots in Disneyland. I mean, it's kind of, they kind of don't rotate quite right. And, you there are some bridges that, frankly, like,
like he's doing something visual there. He's painting a picture for you, and it's an effective picture. Like, I understood what he said when he was telling me, so I didn't need to find a roundabout to do that. He effectively, I could have, and maybe that would have made it look cooler or been more novel, but also, like, he did a good job effectively painting that, and we don't want to overburden the viewer. Editing is a lot of plate spinning, making sure people are entertained and informed, but not too informed, and that, like, you're not entertaining them a lot all the time, because pacing wise that's like too much for them. It's tiring to be entertained that much. So it's a lot of, like, just kind of feeling it out and seeing where they are. But those, for the most part, those are the sections. They're just kind of factual little nuggets, right? We're letting them know, like, we're getting to the end here, part 4. And then, like, when I introduce the planes, I'm basically saying, like, this is the last section. Basically, I'm like, we still haven't talked about this part. But for a game with all of this detail, we've yet to talk about the most detailed part of the experience. Right, okay, cool. Next, same thing again, right? Music, there's no ATC chatter on this one because the music's kind of too forceful. And also, we're kind of getting to the end. And those are all kind of the same. So now we're going to talk about the last section, which is the outro, right? So I've planted the seed at the start that this is an emotional thing, and perhaps maybe over the course of the video you've had some sort of hooks to what they're saying, but for the most part it's a very, 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 very technical interview selections or sections that we've put in. So I want to bring it back around to the emotion, like, excuse me, like, what's the point of this? Like, how can you connect to this game even if you've never played it? And the idea was what I was talking to. I had this idea before we started, and I asked the guys about it, and this was the only answer I got from Jorg that was anyway sort of emotional, but it was quite poignant and nice. But there was a lot of editing work went into sort of like landing the feel that was needed here. I'm gonna just play it first, and I'm not blowing smoke up arse and saying this is like the most amazing piece of filmmaking we've ever done or anything. It's not. It's a fairly acute, sort of nicely put together small moment that I think does enough work to kind of get you where I want it. But the work that went into it, I think, is maybe one of the more interesting editing challenges, just from a technical perspective. So I do want to jump into it a little bit. So we'll just watch the whatever it is, minute and a half, 2 minutes of this, and then I'll show you how it kind of broke down. So I'll come out of this.
In a hard-coded event, you are now in stall, and it never felt right. And so that, at some point, Seb was like, "Look, I'm just gonna add more." And now it's a realistic stall, which is great.
One of the things I love the most about video games and the work we do at Noclip is that games are very technical things, but the ways in which we all talk about them, it tends to be about the way they made us feel. I know this has been complicated. There's been a lot of machine learning and algorithms and data points, but I just want to leave you with one more, and I think it might be my favorite. I asked Jorg what happened when they took the training wheels off the player. What happened when, for the first time, they were presented with that globe and they could pick anywhere in the world to fly to? Where did they go? What was the place that was the most popular? Was it New York or the Grand Canyon or the Bermuda Triangle? His answer surprised me, and it probably shouldn't have surprised me considering the year we've just had. But Jorg said that 70% of players flew to the same place. They flew home.
Like, I remember, like, when the coronavirus hit, like, I remember trying, like, I was supposed to go, like you just said, I was supposed to visit my family, and I couldn't because I live in Germany. I'm like, So I actually flew there and called my parents, and I shared the weather. We just talked about the weather. It was the same time of day, same weather. It looked exactly right. And I basically called them up and said, hey, I'm as close to you as I can get. I think we see that replicate a lot. The stories that people tell us, I mean, there's lots of emails we get every day of people telling us stories like this, and I think it's been if it was even just a little bit helpful in these trying times, I think then it was unexpected in many ways, right? Nobody wants this. But I think it brings the world moved away from us a little, and I think it's a little bit closer inside the sim. So I think it's great to see it.
All right, and then out we go. And then up with our usual thanks to the patrons, and then into the credits. So this is a very simple thing. There's only two things happening. I say something, he says something. But there's a bit of the differences between them, the two of them are sort of there's a little bit of devil in the detail here. And if you're an editor, you probably have noticed what I've done over here to kind of to stretch it out and make it feel the way it feels. So the music is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. That's the first thing. If you have a good music track that has a sort of an emotional stirs emotion in viewers, then it's doing a lot of the work with you, and you need to ride that wave. Just be there with it. Find the parts of the musical score that make your chest fill up and use them. So the first thing you'll notice is where I transition in on this song is not necessarily the start. It's a little bit in, but I've timed it so I get this part here. I actually came in slightly too early, I think.
Players flew to the same place. They flew home. So
that's feeling. That's not the the denouement. That's not the final feeling. That's a feeling of, okay, we're getting there still. Like that's there's if the strings fade out, and then when it come back in, it kind of like, okay, we're settling into it. So we're there's more to come.
Flew to the same place. They flew home.
And then the other one is this bit.
In many ways, right? Nobody wants this.
Where he said nobody wants this, and he's sort of like tearing up a little bit. That's when we get this this is the chest. This is the eyes welling up chest sound of the song, sort of.
It's right. Nobody wants this. But I think it brings the world moved away from us a little, and I think it's
like somber and reflective in a way that I think really works. So that was the first thing. It was queuing all that sort of stuff up. This intro, I'm happy with how I landed it. I think the way I said, I practiced it a lot on the way to the shoot. Everything else was really scripted, and I was able to read them off pretty good. This one, I probably, if we go to the actual cuts of this, I think I even tell Jeremy, look, I'm going to take a lot of swings at this one, and I did it in the middle.
Games, and a lot of the work we do here at raw generation, streaming. And then that's the intro, and then that's the outro. Okay. I'm gonna practice it. Let me do the weird outro that I've been struggling with. Cool. Okay. And we'll do a couple of goes. This might take a little while, and then the intro and outro is the one I want, or the intro is the one that I want to see if we can get the plane on. Cool.
So we tried to see if we get a plane landing for the intro, which we didn't. So, I wanted to do it last, so at least it was the hardest shot, we do it last. That's kind of the idea. Get everything else done, because recording this stuff can be exhausting for both presenter and camera op. Yeah. But yeah, I basically tried this a bunch of times to kind of see how it would land.
70%. And the answer was surprising to me, but considering what's been going on this year, probably shouldn't have been. He said that 70% of flares.
Flares, man.
All right, let me try again.
Things are hard.
Lizard Daddy.
What was this?
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird? An island that Jeffrey...
Oh my God, I forgot about this. All right, this is between you and me.
The answer is they flew home, Jeremy, just so you're not on tenterhooks, but...
I was.
They flew to a small shack in an island that Jeffrey Epstein owned.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird? Lizard Daddy. Sorry. All right, let me try again.
Sorry, we have fun. That didn't make the final cut, amazingly. But now you know that I'm part of Pizzagate.
York said that 70% of players flew to the same place. They flew home.
And I think that's the cut that we ended up using. You'll see the difference in the shot as I've punched in. This is the only time we punched in. That's the normal framing, and for this it's been just to be a little bit closer. Everything's a little bit closer here. Jorg is closer too, you'll notice. So his framing here is actually closer than it's ever been, and then maybe I think he was usually Where are we? Well, let's find him back here. Oh, actually, it's about the same. Maybe use it for that too. Yeah, because that's where it usually was. I like Sebastian. We brought him in a little bit here, and then he's full screen at the end, so we can really see the whites of his eyes. But yeah, it was picking the right shot. This took a while. Like, I guess I got it on the second go maybe, but then
to stir emotions in the play.
Oh, that's the intro. So tried it a couple of times. To have that thing, and it's kind of obvious to anyone who's played the game. But the hope was that, like, I'll set you up that this is that's not the emotional sucker punch. Maybe it is for some people, but hopefully I'm going to bring you in, and then Jorg is going to take you home. And the shots are like, we filmed this. Actually, where we filmed this was funny. It was one of the last shots we did. We're getting planes. I was looking up ATC traffic and flight radar and trying to judge when planes were going to take this. This is runway 30 in Oakland. And planes were landing. And when this one came in, it was super last minute. So Jeremy swung the camera around, got this shot, which I'm not sure if we end up using. And this one extends out, actually. He moves the camera, basically. He tries to reposition it. And then he does a follow pan when it lands. But when he does the follow pan, I basically ran around him. I was quiet, and I tapped him on the shoulder, and I ran around, and I stood in the way, and I kind of eyeballed it. And I was like, look, either I'm going to ruin this shot for your landing, or we'll have some sort of transition. When I turned my head, so it was a little bit of motion, and I ended up using it. It ended up working for the it was the outro. I used it, right here. And the bird even joined in, so it ended up being really good. Look, the bird did the eye line work. We're looking at the plane. The bird's like, hey, look over here. So it actually ends up working out really good. But I just literally ran around him, eyeballed it. I knew I'd be in soft focus if I stood close. So I wasn't sure exactly what focal length he was on, but ended up working out.
One of the things I love the most about video games and the work we do with Noclip is that games are very...
And then same again. We are just a long cut. Just make sure... I don't overly read this. I learn the scripts, but I try and keep it as naturalistic as possible.
Flew to the same place.
And then
they flew home.
One important thing here as well, we had these reversed at one stage, but this is a FedEx plane. And that's not got people on it. That's got boxes on it. This was a Southwest plane. That's got people on it. And I was watching Red Letter Media video, and they were watching a film on Best of the Worst, where the plane, they had somebody who filmed this terrible film in the 90s or early 2000s, had a shot of a FedEx plane taking off as their like moving montage shot. And then I realized, oh shit, I have a shot of a FedEx plane. I can't have that. So I swapped these. So now it's a Southwest one.
Flew home.
Which for some people, a lot of people won't notice the difference. But if you live in America or near an airport, you'll know the two of those planes. If you saw those in, at 2,000 feet, you'd probably be able to notice a Southwest jet. So, it's important just to have that, maybe cover off that detail. And then this is for this actually, what I want to show you is kind of what Jorg's original answer was, because it feels different in the edit. And this is editing. This is kind of like why I love editing is the ability to change the narrative or the emotional weight of something.
Super interesting. And
so we're just gonna have a look at it.
And just yesterday we talked about, hey, the next update.
Oh, let's see.
Enjoy it.
Is it here?
Open that other people could have a good time.
Trying to see if I can find when he said it.
Which it's really for.
Must be near the end.
But you could go there. Like there's now that we try to listen to.
Here, let me zoom in a bit.
Of Lord of the Rings because it's super interesting, and then we get these. And as Seb said, again, just to give you a data point, I think 75% of people
75. Shit, I got the percentage wrong. There you go.
Fly over their hometown first.
Really?
It's like it's super interesting, and then we get these stories like people fly. So it's a celebration of our planet. Countries as we can celebrate it right now. We actually
Yeah, I really want to find this. Sorry, give me a bit more patience. Sorry.
I think it reconnects the planet.
I think it's here.
Even just the process of being able to get in the sky maybe during the the winter.
Yeah, here we go. Here, is this it?
But I think it brings the world
Yeah, here we go. This is it.
stories that people tell us. I mean, there's lots of emails we get every day of people telling us stories like this, and I think it's been actually flew there. Oh no, certainly when
Talking about to their houses, grew up, and you know.
Here we go. Here we go.
You know, many of us have families who are on the other side of the planet, and
So I'm setting him up basically, you know, I'm trying to see if he has a story. I don't even know if he does at this stage, but I'm trying to put the words in his mouth and see, because I knew I needed something like this, like something either him telling us or them telling us about people who had these experiences, because that's what I kept hearing in the weeks and months after, or the weeks after the game came out. So I'm basically trying to put the words in his mouth and see if there's a story there.
plans, it's currently a big discussion in the team how much this.
my final question, I think, it's one that sort of, you know, we've talked a lot about the technical aspects of this game, the way in which you've built the world, built the weather systems, built this believable place, and the physics to explore it. But the emotional side of this, you know, everyone's locked indoors. This game came out that, you know, for people who live in different parts of the world, you know, many of us have families who are on the other side of the planet. And people also just don't live where they grew up, and you know, the first, you know, so many of us go back and fly to our hometown and have that sort of moment. What's it been like since the game came out? Have you found that people fly back to their houses a lot? Like what's it been like for you guys seeing those, like, you know, streamers or YouTube videos or people talking about the really emotional moments they've had with this game?
So generally I like to give really short questions, but this is a situation where I am in the question trying to get them thinking about the answer. So if you ask somebody like, what's your favorite, what was your favorite part of working on the game? They're going to have to do so much like mental work in that moment to try and think about that. And they're going to be feeling panicked because they're being filmed, and they're not going to give an answer that feels good. So generally what you do is kind of in the previous questions, get them thinking about that stuff a little bit, so that when you ask that question, you know, they're in that place. The other way of doing it is what I'm doing here, which is that I'm basically feeding them ideas. You know, I'm trying to give them the template for the answer they want to give me, right? Because there's a tendency when we're talking to people, especially during interviews in these situations where the power dynamic is kind of like all over the place, to give the interviewer what they want. To make the other person happy, who's like brought this camera and putting it in front. And that in many ways, that, you know, you can use that in a manipulative way. I guess I am manipulating them in this way as well, because I'm trying to get them in the sort of to get them to talk about what I feel is there somewhere. I don't know if it's true, or I don't know if it's there for them yet. And the idea is that, like, I'm not feeding them lines to say. They're not going to lie to me. They're going to tell me truth, because people generally in interviews tell truth unless they are overtly trying to lie about something particular, which is why, you know, I don't like doing interviews around the launches of games, because people are definitely in that situation, you know, softening things. But in this situation, like, if I ask them about something, it's going to be way too much hard work for people in these situations to like lie or make something up. So I'm happy to like feed them different ideas of like, oh, these are some things that, you know, maybe you can explore. So like YouTubers or streamers, or, you know, some of us have other, you know, family on the other side of the world. I know Jorg lives in Seattle, and he has a German accent, so I'm guessing his family's in Germany. You know, maybe Sebastian has family who are abroad. So I'm basically just feeding them ideas, hoping that they'll come up with an answer. And then this is the answer that Jorg had. Okay.
I think we had that while we were developing. Like, I remember, like, when the coronavirus hit, like, I remember trying, like, I was supposed to go, like you just said, I was supposed to visit my family, and I couldn't because they live in Germany. I'm like, oh. So I actually flew there and called my parents, and I shared the weather. We just talked about the weather. It was the same time of day, same weather. It looked exactly right. And I basically called them up and said, hey, I'm as close to you as I can get. And I think we see that replicate a lot in the stories that people tell us. I mean, there's lots of emails we get every day of people telling us stories like this, and I think it's been if it was even just a little bit helpful in these trying times, I think then it was unexpected in many ways, right? Nobody wants this, but I think it brings the world moved away from us a little, and I think it's a little bit closer inside the sim. So I think it's great to see it.
Yeah, Sebastian, have you noticed that at all? Have you enjoyed? And then I asked the same question of Sebastian. I got an answer that wasn't as good as Jorg's, so I used Jorg's. So Jorg was doing something that people do when they get emotional and they don't want to show their emotion, which is that he kind of rushed out of his emotions as fast as he could. You can even see now the way he's sort of like thinking about it, right? So what I did in the piece was basically stretch out those moments as much as possible. So you'll see him, like, he kind of rushes through that answer, especially when he gets to the, you know, as close to as I can get. He wants to get out of that as quick as possible because that's like really emotional, you know, to him. It's, you know, it made a lump in my throat when he said that.
It brings the world in many ways, right? Nobody wants this.
It was before that.
And it was unexpected. I think it's been...
Here, is it here?
And called my parents, and I shared the weather. We just talked about the weather. It was the same time of day, same weather. It looked exactly right. And I basically called him up and said, "Hey, I'm as close to you as I can get." And I think, and he's basically in, he's out of it, right? So basically, what I've done is I've used the edit to create these pauses, these dramatic pauses in between some of the parts that he said stuff that I feel like if he had paused and thought. It makes it feel like he's having more of an emotional moment around it. That and the music is doing a lot of the lifting here as well. I was supposed to go, like you just said, I was supposed to visit my family, and I couldn't because I live in Germany. I'm like,
So tiny pause here.
So I actually flew.
Actually, let me bring up his VO because his VO pauses are longer than the video pauses sometimes.
In Germany, I'm like, So I actually flew there. And called my parents, and I shared the weather. We just talked about the weather. It was the same time of day, same weather. It looked exactly right. And I basically called him up and said, "Hey, I'm as close to you as I can get." I think we see that replicate a lot.
Right. So it's there's a different feel to it. If we get rid of that and kind of just have him run through it, it doesn't have the same weight to it.
Looked exactly right. And I basically called him up and said, "Hey, I'm as close to you as I can get." And I think we.
Whereas in here we've done.
And I basically called him up and said, "Hey, I'm as close to you as I can get."
And had the music lift a little bit there, but didn't overdo it, didn't ramp it up. Like, you could have easily just done a little ramp here and made it louder.
Get.
It would have felt too artificial.
I think we see that replicate a lot. The stories that people tell us. I mean, there's lots of emails we get every day of people telling us stories like this, and I think it's been
so that's the big one as well. If we go here and have a look at how he does it, actually
it's if it was even just a little bit helpful.
So I don't tend to keep in people stumbling their words or saying a lot, but for this part it made sense. We're setting up the shot. The last shot is zoomed in the whole way. There's no more of this framing stuff. The frame's gone. He's full screen. We're going to sit with him until the end. And there's this, he's stumbling. Like, you're like, oh, why is he stumbling? He hasn't stumbled this whole video. He sounded so eloquent. And that's because Jorg is very eloquent. And also because in the edit, we've trimmed out any of the ums and ahs, basically, and made it as punchy as possible. But here he's having a little bit of a moment, right? And it literally cuts out. It's like an emergency cut, like we're cutting to a crash in an F1 race, for instance, or we're cutting to a player who's injured on the ground and away from the normal thing. That's the feeling we're trying to give here. Whereas he's talking and he's talking about other players. For the other players, we're showing other gameplay to like simulate what those other players are feeling, and then it cuts back to him in almost like a dramatic way after he stumbles and after there's a pause. And a lot of this is artificial. The artificial pause, the stumbling has been put in to make it give it that weight.
As to you as I can get. I think we see that replicate a lot. The stories that people tell us. I mean, there's lots of emails we get every day of people telling us stories like this, and I think it's been if it was even just a little bit helpful in these trying times, I think then it was unexpected in many ways, right? Nobody wants this, but I think it brings the world moved away from us a little, and I think it's a little bit closer inside the sim. So I think it's great to see it.
And then this shot, this was tough. So basically this shot's here because I couldn't go from that to this. It just felt like sticking a commercial in the middle of an emotional moment. Like, this emotional moment brought to you by Snickers. And I had a bunch of ideas for this. Like, I had gameplay shots, I had that thumbnail shot, I had lots of beautiful shots. In the end, I decided to go for the shot we opened with, which is here after the gameplay. It's impossible not to be emotional about flying. And the idea, hopefully, is to connect a little bit with that physical. Like, from here, we've stopped talking about the game. We're talking about our lives and loneliness and isolation and being away from family and the way the game is helping. So in many ways, it felt weird to finish on a real shot, but it also felt weird to finish on. But it also felt like that was where we were. Like, at this stage, we were in meat space, talking about meat space problems, not game design problems. So I decided to obfuscate this a little bit by dropping the opacity. Obviously, this is a lot darker than the usual shot. The usual shot is that bright. So I wanted to make it a bit more twilighty. It was pretty easy. And also, like, the object leaving frame is the same as the actor leaving stage. That's the end, right? So the plane leaving the frame. If I was just to cut, like, if we did it this way and it was just like, oh, here's a plane, and then it's gone. It's gone. It doesn't have the same feeling of, like, feels a bit more like the end. It feels like an end, and this whole thing needed an end before we got into this. And the credits, which have a little bit of a fun flyover over Rome, where I almost crash into a bunch of things. I actually did crash at the end of this, but it's been edited out. There's no plane crashes in this whole video, because there's no plane crashes in the game, really. So kind of wanted to obfuscate that. So yeah, that was the idea, was to give this, and also just to let people, like, think about it. Like, let the audience think about it for a second, like, how they feel. Let them... At this stage, maybe they're having a little bit of an emotional moment themselves. Maybe they're pushing against it, which is what we tend to do when we feel the urge to be sad, or cry or sentimental or whatever that is. So let's let them sort of, like, sit in it for a second and kind of, like, feel it out. So that was kind of the idea behind this. And the music is just beautiful. Like, the music's gorgeous. That's the reason why this is here, because the music is just fantastic. And then there's a little bit of an audio of this is a jet taking off. From an audio library as well. And there's something about that sound. It's, like, very, again, sentimental and consistent. It doesn't matter where you live in the world. You know what that sound is, probably, unless you live, not near a big city or out in the wilderness somewhere. And that was it, to basically give that sense, that feeling. And it's a feeling that's very easy to tap into these days. Like, this whole project felt very prescient because of our inability to get on this Look, Carnage is there. Thank you to everyone who supports our work, by the way. Look, all these awesome people. Amazing. Patrick, Ari, Ekian, Laxo. Sorry, Patrick. Is the longest name, but we also have Gabriel Costa, who was hired sword, and then there's one other one which I have to trim down. It's the one who puts Scarecrow in their name. Where is it? I have to manually edit that one every time. It's pretty long normally. Where is it? Where are you, my friend? Oh no, was it? That was it. It was Patrick. Yeah, it was Patrick. He puts Scarecrow in quotation marks in his name as well. So I forgot someone in the thank yous. I forget who it was. There was some... Oh, wait, Endless ADC I wanted to mention. I forgot to mention it. And then the ending, I just had to do a bit of ATC chatter. Oh, no, I put the clicks on too. I shouldn't have done that. I always try and keep the... They sound nasty and bassy because there's an audio treatment happening on that. They should be down here. It'll sound more natural. Oops. Sounds better then. Ugh, all tinny. There you go. I've made it. I've changed it. This is the director's cut you've watched. And that was it. That was the project. Microsoft Flight Simulator documentary. very technical with an emotional sort of underscore to the whole thing. And like I said, it was it felt prescient for the times. It felt appropriate. It was it's a time in our lives that we will always remember being far from people, or at least many of us will, regardless of if you were on, a plane flight away or you're down the road. Like, we've all had to isolate for some periods of time, some longer than others, some further than others, but we've all had to deal with loneliness. And for those of us who have family abroad or family on the other side of a country, where a plane is the way to do it, there was a reason we put this documentary up on Thanksgiving. It just felt like it was the time. And that was it. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being part of Noclip Editing Club. This was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you. If you have any questions or chats, we'd love to have conversations in the comments. And I mean that for everyone. There's a bunch of people here who are editors, who are better editors than me. A lot of different people of varying skills as part of our community and have been for a long time. So I'd be down to hear some of your thoughts. Is there anything you do differently? Is there any techniques that I could employ that would work better? Are you new to editing and you're sort of have questions about any of this? Please stick them in the comments below and let me know what you thought about this as a production. Would you prefer me to go into the nitty gritty a bit more? Is it too long? Is it too short? Let me know. Thank you for supporting our work. I hope you have a wonderful December. We have a bunch of stuff coming this month. And I'll see you next time on Noclip Editing Club. Adios.